over the half hour that we have left, does anybody have any questions or comments?
We talked about briefly before when we were going over the emotional balance, and we talked about the adverse health effects from and the contagious nature of negative mental states, negative emotional states. I got like a sort of like frightened feeling that I'm just susceptible to, you know, the toxic like work environment that I'm often in, or circles of friends that I know, stuff like that. And is there a way to arm oneself with proper antigens, or to maybe even become the contagion of positive emotional states?
Yeah, that's a great question, because are we always at the mercy of other people's emotions? Thank God not. Can we actually create an emotional immune system? And we do, yes, we can. And we do that without any emotional balance. So the thing that His Holiness actually mentions this in his conversation with Paul Ekman. Wonderful, wonderful book. Emotional awareness. And it's so you know how busy His Holiness is these days. I mean, nobody gets much time with His Holiness. Paul Ekman, I mean, a man that he had only met once before, I think, got something like 5 days for a conversation, long, full days of conversations with His Holiness about emotional balance and the whole life and nature of emotions. And then Ekman published the transcript, more or less, of their conversations, and it's amazing. You know, that's the guy who, we were here with. So part of it was His Holiness said that in regard to compassion. So here's the thing. Compassion requires, first of all, attention. There's a 3-step process in compassion, in active for someone. First of all, it requires attention. You attend to someone who is suffering. This can be difficult in our busy lives, and the biggest obstacle to paying attention to someone in need is self-absorption. And because we're just not available to attend to. Secondly, we feel with. You attend to, and then you feel with. This is empathy. And what happens then is that this empathy is actually a moment of self-awareness. Because what we are doing is feeling, because of this contagion, in a sense, it's the same thing. We are becoming attuned with someone else's suffering, and we feel that in ourselves. And once and the research shows this also, that once we reach that point where we actually feel it ourselves, what someone else's distress, the chances of us taking the 3rd step, acting for, attend to, feel with, act for, the chances, once we feel it ourselves, are very great. It's getting to that point, and actually attention is the first part. But His Holiness said that in regard to that, the empathy, it has to be brief. It's, that you can't be overwhelmed by it, because then you will become disabled. Someone's depression, someone's despair, etc. You have to feel it, but don't be disabled by it. That's exactly what you're talking about.
Mm.
How do you do that? So it's with the knowing the process, basically, how it works. You know that you know the process of contagion. Simply that alone prepares you to understand that what is this going on? I feel something. And then what happens is the passing of the contagion is along the road that Daniel Goleman in his book Social Intelligence calls the low road. It's below the level of awareness. So you're not really sure what's going on. It's this act of self-awareness. You realize you're feeling something. But remember the blurring of the boundary between the emotional and the cognitive. So what has to, the thing that needs to happen is that it becomes cognitive. As soon as you are feeling the thing, that you become aware of what's going on, that you are feeling it. And then you have a chance to, when you become aware of the emotion. How do you do that? In the way that we did the emotional meditation, where you feel there's a subjective response. So there's an object, you feel a subjective response, you turn your awareness onto the subjective response, and then it becomes a mental appearance that you are not fused with, you are not grasping to. So that's simply being aware of what's going on is what armors you from catching the contagion. And then, is it possible to become contagion yourself? Plus contagion. Can you change someone else's attitude? Can you change the way they're feeling? Yes. Not always, of course. It's very interesting, and I think, still an open, a lot more to be said, or certainly in my understanding of it. In a dyad, two people in relationship, why is it that one person is influencing the other's emotion? Rather than, why not just the one that has the most positive emotion always wins? Wouldn't that be good? Then we really could kill them with kindness. But it's not always that way. Maybe it's, not, but it's not always that way. Why is it that in a dyad, in a relationship, why is it that one person kind of habitually sets the emotional tone? There are power issues, all sorts of things that may be involved. Often, in a relationship, it's the woman who sets the emotional tone, and the man just is responding and trying to make her feel good. It's not an uncommon dyad. So, can you then? How do you armor yourself? Well, if compassion is your conative, if it's your mission, and you don't grasp to the emotion that is arising, and especially in what is going to be the work setting, the most toxic possibility is going to be the performance review, right? Or someone, and especially if a boss, someone in authority, someone with power, is telling you about your performance or your value, and you don't have the power to say, no, you're wrong. You know, that's the setup for a really damaging, destructive situation. So I don't have much experience with that because I don't operate in that world at all. And actually, it's been so long since I have. It's a very distant memory. But one thing that comes to mind is, what self has the investment in that opinion? Is that defining myself in a way? What is the real source of my distress in the evaluation? You know, it could be, maybe that would be helpful and valuable to look at, the self-representation that has something at stake here. Obviously, you know, this person that I overheard last night go on and on and on at a table right next to me was in the film business. But it was all about this producer. And the power of this producer to ruin your career, and how they just, you know, everybody, the whole thing just sounded poison, and they hated going to work. They were, you know, the person wasn't giving them enough, you know, was demanding so much, but not giving them enough. That one more thing, that would have set them free. You know, if they could learn this one more skill, then they could go anywhere. You know, it was like, wow, unbelievable. But I just thought, what is it that, what's this self that would just have to stand there and take it, more or less? You know, for one. And what self would be immune to that? So if there was a selfless response of, what would that be? It would be compassion, wouldn't it? That a low jump, for instance. Wow, could that be practical in New York? I mean, how revolutionary to take, no, you take the gain, I'll take the loss. You know, somebody is trying to make you look bad at work. Oh yeah, you take credit, go ahead. You know, it may not advance your career all that much. You know, karmically, it's going to pay off, right? I'm not so sure whether it's going to pay off tomorrow in that job, but you're going to, you know, it's going to pay off without a doubt. So, yeah, the immune system is, first of all about recognizing the process, that emotions are contagious. And you're probably going to feel, when somebody is angry at you, or they are feeling threatened in their own status at work, where their boss has come down on them, told them to increase productivity, snap the whip, you're not getting enough out of your people. You know, they're feeling tremendously threatened, aren't they? And so they need to threaten somebody, etc. And you can just see the cascade and just say, you know, I feel the threat, okay. I understand what's going on. And just that simple act of understanding, then, it becomes a cognitive process. It has moved out of the amygdala, you know, fear, just, and so there's a powerful connection actually between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, and it goes both ways. The amygdala informs the prefrontal cortex, the left prefrontal cortex, dangerous situation, what to do about it, and then the amygdala, or the prefrontal cortex, the cognitive, can say, you know, does send a feedback message, chill, it's okay, everything's okay, I've got it under control, I know what's happening. And then the instinctive response, or that low road response, actually responds to that because of that two-way stream. So probably something like that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, Tim.
When we're practicing taking the mind as the path, I have two questions. One is, within that landscape, just to categorize what would be considered mental activity, does it also include the feelings that are arising? And I'm sorry if you've already answered it, but mental images of the breath, and so forth.
Yeah, so we know we can have a mental experience of the breath, right? So wouldn't it be good to be able to recognize when it is a mental experience rather than a tactile sensation? Wouldn't it be nice if we could recognize, so how do you know that? What is absolutely proof positive that it has become a conceptual experience rather than a tactile experience in breath? It's when you're getting bored with it. When you seek novelty. One of the key attributes, or when of the left hemisphere conceptual relationship, plucking something out of the living context, it becomes dead, lifeless, mechanical after it becomes familiar. And so then the left hemisphere, one of the that conceptual mind, one of the most salient attributes of it is its seeking novelty. So if you can, I mean, how important is that to be able to recognize when the breath has become a conceptual rather than a tactile sensation? If you can do that, you might be able to recognize when your boyfriend or girlfriend or your husband or wife has become a concept to you. When a kiss is a conceptual experience. Is that possible? How would you know? Maybe you're bored with that too. It is possible. It is possible. This happens. Has this happened to any of you? That you meet somebody, they inspire wonder, awe, passion. You have a living moment-to-moment relationship with them. And then it seems like suddenly the honeymoon is over, and then they become a conceptual experience to you. There's that look again. Oh, I know that. You are, etc. Fill in the blank. That's a conceptual relationship. So your question again, the breath. What was it again?
The first part is, I'm just trying to get clear as to when I'm taking the mind as the path, what I can categorize as mental phenomena, because I'm getting to a point where it seems as though there isn't much activity happening. And I'm kind of like, what do I do now?
Yeah, great.
And I'm thinking to myself, am I losing vividness? And that's why I'm wondering, what should I do now?
Yeah, that's a possibility. So the faux samadhi of subtle dullness is very peaceful, very serene. The stability is very good because there's not much vividness. So that's your key. If there's vividness, or if there's not vividness, then but it's extremely stable. That's what I call faux samadhi, but would be called subtle dullness, which is not a bad place. I mean, there are worse places to be. because the subtle dullness is not that difficult to correct. Or, you just need vividness. The stability is already there, so that's pretty sweet. Another possibility, so that's one possibility. Yeah, it's, you need more vividness. And taking the mind as the path is a really good way to do that. Another thing that could be happening, as you are, so there's always the shy maiden or cockroach phenomenon also, which is after, when you begin to turn your awareness onto appearances, they scatter. Okay, I was focused on my breath and I had no problem with mental appearances arising. Okay, I'm going to now give you my full attention. Hello, where are you? It's like, in your apartment above the pizza parlor, you come home at midnight, turn on the light, and the cockroaches all scatter. It's like your thoughts. You shine the spotlight of your awareness on them, and they scatter. So you have to kind of look out of the corner of your eye, at the shy maiden. No, I'm not really interested in you. And then, something will happen. She'll be there. The thoughts will be there. So there's that possibility also. So 2 possibilities so far. There's another possibility. So as you maintain the stillness of your awareness with these mental appearances arising, abiding, and dissolving, without grasping onto them, the fire hose or the fire hydrant that you've been drinking from, just as a flood, the Times Square of the mind, it's just appearances, appearances, appearances. They will begin to slow down. They will begin to slow down, and they will become then the fire hydrant becomes, a stream, and finally it becomes individual droplets of mental experience. I can remember in Phuket after a few weeks, because I went there with quite a lot, on my mind, and things were going really well, and so I was, I felt lucid with this practice, and I could watch individual appearances arise, abide, and dissolve, and I could get to 20 appearances, and I could, recall all 20 appearances, etc. What could be wrong with that? But it didn't seem like there was an end to the appearances in that particular practice. Alan said, had said that as you maintain the practice, the sheer volume of these appearances is going to diminish. And so I went to him and asked, "Are you sure about that?" And he said, "Yes, the sheer volume will diminish because this is the best game in town. And this is the mudra for stillness of awareness, is unflickering candle flame, that index finger." So because the stillness of your awareness is the best game in town, the volume of mental appearances does subside, and it did. And then you begin to see distinct gaps, and then the gaps get to be bigger and bigger and bigger. There's a mental appearance arises, abides, and dissolves. Arise, abide, dissolve. And gets to be bigger and bigger gaps. The images can become pixelated. They can begin to see almost that they're like translucent, like see-through appearances. Weird stuff can happen in retreat. Right? But this is, you begin to see like pixels, like half the pixels of it, they're no longer high definition. The appearances are no longer linked in a narrative. They're more like stochastic images, random, all of that just indicating that yes, things are really beginning to settle And then what are you experiencing in that gap? It's the space of the mind from which these appearances are arising, abiding, and dissolving. So in the practice of awareness, there are two different ways of going to it. And unfortunately, if we had another 4 hours or so, we would go to that practice next, awareness of awareness. Shamatha without a sign. So 2 ways of going to it. One is this way, that you just maintain the stillness of your awareness with taking the mind as the path. The gaps open up, and then you just kind of take the gap as your object. That's the space of the mind from which these appearances are arising. And then it just gets to be more and more and more space. Fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer appearances. The other way is just basically to just dive right into the space with the stillness of awareness that you generate from the awareness of the breath. So that's stillness of awareness, and then you just give up the breath altogether and only awareness. What is awareness? What is sheer awareness? Awareness with no object? It's not anything that you have to add or learn or develop or create, because it's there every moment. And the sheer awareness is what remains after you eliminate everything else. That's what's there. As Contagion Pt6 said, it's so simple. You won't believe that's it. Something like that. Very briefly.
Yeah, I just when you talk about subtle dullness, if you can you have subtle dullness in this watching of the mind, and because I feel sometimes it gets a little dry, and so you talked about boredom with watching the breath, and I find sometimes I need to like apply some love and compassion, like some.
Oh yeah.
Because it just gets so like dry and.
Well, the dryness may be that self-absorption. Yeah, that it's all about me, my practice, etc. So the last thing then to leave you with, because we do have to wrap up, is that there are 4 dimensions of balance, right? If you're only doing shamatha practice, that can become dry, sterile, self-absorbed, because it's all about my stability and vividness, my shamatha. You know, you can become obsessed with it. It starts with a conative, and you need to, even if you are doing a 3-year shamatha retreat, you would be including all 4 dimensions in it so that it doesn't become unbalanced. It's so easy to have an unbalanced dharma diet. And, you know, in this tradition, the unbalance would be no shamatha, not enough, you know, and that's unbalanced because you need the shamatha. But it's also, you can easily get too much, only obsessed with shamatha. You have to have that loving kindness. Why are you doing this practice? And that keeps you integrated. So the 4 immeasurables, compassion, you know, when you think about what is it, the conative dimension, we only did the tip of the iceberg, you know, loving kindness, and that focused on yourself. Being, what is my motivation for doing this practice? The entire lower, you could say, well, almost the entire long rim fits into the there's an element of it that fits into the conative. When you think of impermanence, etc., that is, and leisure and fortune, all of that is intended to arouse aspiration, motivation. How do I light my hair on fire? You know, it's recognizing that it could end, everything I have, all of these advantages could end at any time, and on and on. So you have to have that, you have to have the wisdom practices also. You can't eliminate any of them. You have to include all of them to have a well-rounded practice. And then and it also is going to keep you excited, involved, fresh, working on something new. And obviously within the cognitive, within the wisdom practices, etc., there are just levels, infinite levels of things that you can do. So.
One last question, just to make sure. When we use the mind as the path and we dive right into the space with stillness of awareness and give up the breath, is there still at that moment a tactile sensation of the breath?
No.
Unless we're alive?
No.
If we're alive?
That what?
If we're alive, there's no tactile sensation of the breath.
If we're alive?
If we're still in this body,
yeah.
There's no tactile sensation of the breath when we have given up the
No.
breath.
So in the same way that you could have a lucid dreaming experience of the breath with no tactile sensation, you could have practice awareness with no tactile sensation, but you just give up the breath altogether, then knowing the breath as well. It's awareness because that's an appearance, right? And so you can, I shouldn't even be probably telling you all this, but you can have awareness with no appearances whatsoever and hang out there for a long time and without being dull, without being lax, without being spaced out, with being totally spacious, vivid. So it's Dujong Lingpa calls this awareness with no object resplendent emptiness. And this was right at the beginning of this text Natural Liberation we did in Phuket. And I went into one of our first meetings with Alan, and I said, I have a question about this. And he said, I know, resplendent emptiness, right? Kalippa. Yeah, so you can have that experience of awareness with no object, and that is substrate consciousness. The only thing, there's plenty going on, believe me. Luminosity, non-conceptuality, and bliss. It's, what's the description of clear light? What's the description of direct perception of emptiness? Very, very similar. What would be the near-lengic view, do you think, of the direct perception of emptiness? There are a lot of causes and conditions. A lot of conditions. What would be the near-lengic view, the thing that actually turns over? Is it going to be a moment of conceptuality or non-conceptuality?
For the direct perception of emptiness?
Yeah. So. Anyway, thank you all. Amazing. We put in an 8-hour day talking about amazing things, meditating all day long. New York City, Manhattan, beautiful spring day. And we chose to come here to meditate and to hear about meditation. It's extraordinary. I rejoice. We all should rejoice in the virtue, recognizing the cognitive intelligence. What leads to happiness, authentic happiness? How does that differ from just simple hedonic pleasure of 7 million people today? There's a big difference, isn't there? Rejoice in your cognitive intelligence coming here. And rejoice also in Three Jewels, this extraordinary place, long time institution now, going for how many years? 15 years probably, or better. 20 years. Yeah. How extraordinary. And it takes people who, with, how bodhicitta happens. It's laksa, personal responsibility. Even if nobody is going to help me, I'm going to make this happen. May all living beings be free from suffering. May all living beings be happy. May it be so. And then it's, I'm going to make it happen. Even if nobody else helps me. That's what it takes to run a place like this. You've got to have a few people at least with that personal responsibility. So I rejoice in the virtue of people who are doing that, saying, I'm going to keep this place running. And because of that, it sounds like, hopefully there'll be another 20 years. So thank you, Sam, for producing the event. Thank you, Stephen, and Esther, and whoever else is welcome. Free Jewels, thank you so much.
And Mama Doug, on behalf of all of us and the Three Jewels, we would just like to thank you so much for taking this time to teach us. You're doing such incredible work, and it comes at great personal energetic expense, and it sounds like you could, be in a beautiful retreat somewhere, growing and learning even more, and you took the time to come to crazy old Times Square of the mind and rescue us. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So one of the things that will really jumpstart your practice, of course, is retreat. And so I am leading a number of retreats around the country. And if you're interested in information, and there will be retreats beginning again. I just finished retreats, a cycle of retreats, and so beginning around February again next year in Massachusetts would be the nearest, at least at this point. So December also there will be a 3-day retreat up in Gloucester, a residential retreat with new stuff, and then also February. There'll be probably a month or a week or 2 week, and I think there's a good chance we'll have a month-long retreat in Massachusetts next sometime, April, March or something. So if you would like information about that, about retreats, so that if it works out for you, that you would like to be informed, there is on the main desk out there, there's a little sign-up sheet that just put your email down, and then I'll make sure that the information gets sent to you. So good luck finding a new center, and all the best with your practice. Thank you so much for your great hospitality.
Thank you.
Take care, prosper, help others. Happy trails.